AI can have like a democratizing effect as well, where me whether it's a game studio or even as an engineer, like in a startup, right? I can be as productive as a larger game company or a development house or product company by leveraging AI, right? Because ultimately, like the bottleneck is no longer the lines of code, but it becomes more of your the ability to innovate, right?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Peer Review. Today on the show, we've got Joona Rahko with us. Joona is the VP of Engineering of Layer AI. They're doing some pretty cool work at the intersection of AI, generative AI, and game development. He's spent over a decade in software engineering. He's spent a bunch of time at Unity. He led front-end projects at scale and also helped shape Unity Cloud. What makes Joona's story more interesting is how multi-dimensional he is. He's a former entrepreneur. He's a lifelong gamer himself, which is cool. And then he was a semi-professional athlete as well. So when it comes to thinking about how we build, play, compete, he brings some great perspective. Joona, welcome to Peer Review.
Thanks, Amar. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great. So I think, the overall today we wanted to kind of talk about AI and gaming and how the future of these kinds of AI for gaming and especially around the creative process. Maybe to kick things off, like you spent time at Unity, now obviously Layer, where you're running engineering. I mean, where in the gaming kind of pipeline are you seeing issues today where there's problems that maybe could be solved with Gen AI or not, but just, what is causing heartburn for teams?
I think there's a lot of like common tasks, regardless of where you are in the gaming company. You're dealing with a lot of mundane kind of repetitive tasks that you just don't want to deal with. Like, I mean, some people really love these things. Like take an example, like rigging a 3D model, for example. Those things are very time consuming, very repetitious. If you're creating like LiveOps content, for example, you need to kind of customize the sizing for different viewports and platforms. A lot of these things take a lot of time. And also with LiveOps, for example, if you're like trying to personalize content for a specific cohort, you need to almost customize your assets and it takes a while.
What's been the traditional way that people were doing that?
I mean, like obviously by hand. So like if you did this, so a lot of the time artists take this, like banner ads, for example, they resize them, move objects around, save it with some kind of suffix like, hey, this size, this size, this size. I don't know, you have to create 100 variations of that, right? And then with rigging, obviously using tools like Blender or I'm trying to remember what the other one is now, but it doesn't matter. These different tools and you're doing the skeletons and stuff and like rigging the things, it takes a long time. So yeah, overall, like, a lot of these types of tasks take a lot of time that ultimately a lot of people and artists don't want to deal with as well.
And what are some of the other areas where so assets is definitely one thing, like other key areas where you think maybe there are some real process improvements that could come?
Yeah, I think like there's some, obviously I haven't been at Unity now for a year and a half and stuff, but a few things have been interesting, kind of like MCP integration directly into Unity or Unreal, being able to, but this is more like a developer use case, less of an artist use case, where you're able to kind of create scenes, prompting and this type of stuff. That's very useful. There was that one very cool demo for Blender as well for creating like 3D objects as well. And
right,
those things have been like pretty cool things to observe. But I mean, like there's so many applications for like AI in gaming and outside, but especially in gaming. So I mean, there's a lot of redundancies that could be fixed.
So, I mean, it sounds like a lot of it is around like the creative process and sort of these assets that you're kind of mentioning, like not unlike, Hollywood kind of, if you will, in terms of the storytelling, but then also
Yeah, storytelling would be a perfect use case as well. There's some interesting companies like that are doing kind of work in that space as well, being able to tell stories through Gen AI.
So I started a company in 2006, in the digital advertising space. And we were doing kind of a new way of selling your ads. And a lot of people didn't want to adopt it really, actually. It was it was like moving to programmatic instead of people selling it. And all like the NBCs of the world are all like, your guys are shit. We prefer to sell it our way. But then when the global financial crisis hit in 2008, everyone was like, shit, I need to like find revenue. I need to find new ways of cutting costs.
Yep.
And so then we started to grow, really fast. And I kind of think like the coming recession is going to lead to more adoption in AI because people are going to be
Mhm.
like, I gotta find better ways to do stuff. Is that
So in one hand, like companies are finding ways to optimize cost, which means like using more AI to reduce cost, right? And it doesn't or increase productivity. I don't think that necessarily like what's the word like the adopting AI immediately results in less people being hired necessarily. It can also like result in an increase in productivity. Like in the sphere of gaming, for example, you have some games where you like in gaming we call them whales, like these big spenders, for example, in games, and they will buy all the experience boost and backs, and they will blow through the gameplay very fast, and then there's no more content, right? And the gameplay loop is exactly the same, but if only there were more levels, only more characters, bosses to play against, more items, more content in general, then you would be able to, those players would be able to, play the game longer, right? So sometimes like in those cases, you wouldn't like lose an employee. It's more like you just create more, right?
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes, of course, it results in a reduction in workforce where something gets automated, for example. In gaming, I think maybe some studios can create exactly what they need with less people, and then they end up laying people off.
In the US, like there's a lot more talk about a recession now and the economy slowing.
Mhm.
And I think people are starting to think about how AI could fit into that, and does it help maybe bigger companies versus smaller companies? What's your kind of take on this?
I think it helps everybody in different ways. I think smaller companies are able to be more competitive in the space because previously they might have been more constrained about on the engineering resources and how much they can actually ship in a given time. Whereas now with AI, they're able to ship those great ideas out to the market way faster.
Yeah.
Uh, then for the larger companies, obviously, it's a way to increase productivity, maybe cut costs. But ultimately, I think it just overall makes the entire industry better. But I do really like the fact that if you have really great ideas, you're able to get those ideas out to the market faster. And I think it really evens out the playing field as well.
Yeah. I mean, the internet sort of was like democratizing distribution a little bit. Like, I think AI is kind of helping democratize intelligence, right? And sort of
Mm.
make knowledge, equally spread across everybody. So like you said,
Mm.
I think I love that idea of, hey, I have a great idea and now I can like get it to market faster because I can produce it faster, Very cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Before
Yeah.
the time to actually deliver it was just you were constrained by dollars that you could afford to spend on engineers and other things. So those things are no longer as much of a factor as before.
Yeah.
They still are, but not as much.
So, I mean, actually just based on that, like a question I have is, what in your mind separates like a cool AI experiment, that demo on Twitter or X of like, oh, look at this thing versus like production ready tool that a studio can really depend on, because I feel like that's been one of the big challenges for AI. So like, how do you see that?
Get the basics right. So I think one of the things that a lot of AI tools out there that exist today, they don't look into basic things like having a SOC 2 certification, for example, ISO 27001. In some cases, some people would call those just like, oh, that's just a rubber stamp. But those things
Yeah.
are important to go through, like legal reviews, for
Yeah.
example. Auditability is very important. So let's say in our case, when you're generating assets, you need to be able to trace those back to the original prompts and parameters that were used to create those assets. So in case there's a dispute about, let's say, copyright, you can always call like, well, I didn't ask it to create a Taylor Swift. I just asked it to create a girl with a guitar. So I wasn't trying to infringe on anybody's IP, right? So like that ability to trace things back is very important. Permission management, SSO scheme, all these things are very important. So these are kind of what I would bucket as overall like enterprise readiness and
Yeah.
enterprise tools. That's a very key thing that big businesses need before they can actually adopt these things. And in
Totally.
order also to pass the kind of the security tools as well.
I mean, one of the things that we sort of, everyone talks about like AI apps being like these thin wrappers, but what we've also kind of noticed is like half the features people talk about having to build have nothing to do with AI, right? All those things you just mentioned, SOC 2, access controls, all that, there's nothing to really do with GenAI. I mean, maybe GenAI can help you build it faster, but if you're going to sell this product to a company, they need all the things. They need reporting, need auditability, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, and those are not necessarily the sexy things that you would think when you're thinking about AI. Those can be very mundane and boring, but those are like usually hard requirements
Yeah,
when it comes to tools. Obviously, there's transparency on pricing. That's also very important, and
sure.
predictability, because and another thing which I feel like we benefited from, for example, is like the predictable pricing. So we have seat-based pricing. So when customers come in, they know exactly how much they're going to pay at the end of the month. Whereas it's like, if you're, let's say, doing metering, for example, you don't have controls, your artist can go rogue in your larger studio, and then like your budgets will blow up and you go like, whoa, what happened here? So I think
So
those,
you guys are, you're providing a set of tools that help people create visual assets for
yeah,
their games, right? And do prompts and make it much faster to edit assets and whatnot. So it is probably pretty token intensive. So how do you manage that in terms of, you mentioned seat-based pricing. I think a lot of people are struggling with this in Gen AI, right? Do I go seat-based? Do I use usage-based? Do I limit people?
yeah. So we are like right now we're fully seat based. So at the same time, like that pricing model was invented before we had video and 3D models available. So right now we have some studios obviously that are way past their like allocation in terms of like it's not economically like feasible for us to actually provide them that service at that cost.
Yeah.
So we move into some kind of mix between seed and then tokens, and then there should
Right.
be like plenty of tokens available so that you can get a lot of usage. But if you're a real power user, then there's a surcharge, right? But then the idea is that you're gonna be able to still define like the upper cap, how many tokens are you gonna be able to burn at the organization level. Maybe be able to assign budgets at the individual level, like how much a specific user can use, so that you don't burn your entire organization budget of like GenAI tokens or creative units or whatever you want to call them in a small span of time. The second thing, which is also interesting, is kind of like the not just budgetary control, but control in general, because sometimes as a studio, you might say like, I don't feel comfortable using X and Y, Z model, for example, like, right? Then you should be able to also have that control of saying like, well, these base models are now disabled for my users to use, right? Same thing comes to like optionality too, where like, let's say you have a partnership with Microsoft and you want to use, let's say, something from them and not Google, for example. Maybe like being able to choose your LLM and this type of stuff could be also useful. Control in general is very useful for enterprises in many cases.
Yeah, and I feel like they really want to be able to have those, like you said, per user limits, limits at a team level so that they don't have budget kind of blowouts happen.
No, exactly. Like I think another very interesting thing is like why when people say thin wrappers, right? And often in this space, it's like you have a lot of multiple providers, right? So like in 3D, you have providers like Meshi, with a Shutterstock at some point, Rodin, and so forth, right? But then often as an enterprise, when you go to these providers directly, you're kind of like, you go through the procurement process, maybe you pass it, maybe you don't pass it, right? But it's very easily happens that you buy these tokens, for example, you use these services, but then you have a better provider out there, and now you have these tokens like parked in a tool that you're not using anymore, right? So being able to have a thin wrapper, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a thin wrapper, it's a pretty thick wrapper. It gives you a lot more optionality because it doesn't lock you down to a specific like base model or vendor, but allows you to actually seamlessly move in between those vendors within a modality like 3D, but also cross over. So being able to forge with Flux, for example, or SDXL, right?
Right.
And then we take that image and then convert that to 3D or video or stitch those videos together. So that optionality is very helpful because you have those credits. It doesn't matter if something gets outdated base model wise, for example, you can always use them for something else.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. They have a lot more flexibility with it.
Yeah.
So let's say you got an engineering team and they're just kind of starting to explore AI in their pipeline. Like where do you suggest they begin?
I think one of the key things is create incentives for people to try out AI.
Interesting.
So,
I haven't heard that. Okay.
yeah, no, it's more of like one thing that we did as a part of like our values exercise. So we had an offsite last week in Napa with the team, and we were just trying to like establish kind of engineering values. We just Well, initially we had it almost like automate as its own value. And then there's innovate as a separate value. We kind of combine those together into a single thing, which is like innovating in terms of product and pushing the envelope and trying to think ahead beyond the immediate requirements that, let's say, I might tell like, hey, build X, and they might think like, what else can we do? But also innovate in terms of process. And this includes like, what can we do better? Like in terms of creating PRDs, can we use AI there? Can we use AI to create TDDs? Are there some agents that we could build that would automate some of our work and make us more productive? Or code review tools like, CodeRapid and whatnot, or beyond, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of great alternatives out there. And then, or using Cursor, Windsurf, like to help with code production. Overall, it's just creating that culture where innovation and trying out these tools is embraced. And like we had a theme week a couple of weeks back where I was just busy like wiping out the credit card for these different tools so that people could try things out and then see how they work, right?
So how do you guys, I mean, one of the challenges a lot of teams have been facing is, okay, they want to try out a new tool, but a lot of times that experimentation may not really result in anything, right? So you try some testing tool, or you say, oh, we're going to try this, like you said, Cursor or Windsurf or whatever. Like somebody tries it out for 3 weeks and then they go, you know what? It's not really meeting what I needed to do, or it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. So some of these more robust processes, like, we're focused on code review or, something in testing, it could take a while and a few people involved to like test it out. What's your thoughts on how to balance that investment versus the productivity benefits you get out of it?
I try to quote unquote hire the right people. Like in the sense that I trust that they are pragmatic in terms of what they do. I mean, like forget about AI. I'm just thinking about automation in general. Like I was a victim of my own over optimization at many different parts of my career where I had something very mundane to do and I spent 2 days writing a script to do what would have taken me 2 hours manually to do. And obviously, like it's not cost efficient, but maybe there was a personal gain into being able to learn how to do certain things there, right? So overall, I think it boils down to trust. So I just trust people and the engineers to make the right decision. And when that investigation is actually worthwhile company resources and time. But like in this case, we had a time boundary in the sense like, hey, we're doing this theme week in this week. It doesn't mean that don't touch any tools outside of these hours, right? But like we did a theme week and we did a recap, then we draw action items like, okay, let's define cursor rules for the front-end project and back-end project. And let's write 5 end-to-end tests with using this some AI-powered end-to-end testing tool and like, and so forth. So we threw up some action items. So it's kind of time constrained still so that we don't take forever to optimize and be faster, only not to deliver anything. So I guess that's one way.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. All right. So just maybe to wrap things up, like give me one big prediction you have for AI in game development in 2025.
That's a good question. I think I'll go beyond that because I can't exactly predict when certain things will land. But a lot of the time in games, like a lot of the content doesn't just get delivered when the game gets shipped, but it kind of gets delivered incrementally over time. Like imagine kind of like a card game, you might have like a Valentine's card pack or Halloween pack, or you might want to show ads that are also seasonal. So imagine a lot of these types of kind of like ad content or what we call it in gaming, this is like LiveOps content. This will get delivered using AI. So I imagine that this will get automated where instead of users defining, for example, that I want to show this content in my game, it will be something more dynamic where the game will send some parameters over to an AI pipeline, let's say the player name, avatar, and so forth. And then the AI will then generate some content dynamically for the player. And the goal of this obviously is to drive up engagement and the lifetime value, which we call like LTV in games. And assuming that's the case and that the lifetime value is increased more than the cost of creating those customized assets, I assume that's going to like really change the industry a lot. And obviously beyond just the LiveOps generation or the ad generation, I presume that a lot of the gameplay content might also change as a result. So imagine something like personalized 3D models in a game, 3D apps, like Coca-Cola having their own little model in a, I don't know, Roblox or Minecraft or something like that. And then that could be a very interesting thing too. Or anything like more interactive like that.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much. It was great to chat with you, and see you soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.